Bakura versus Yugi and Kaiba. The final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters brought us some explosive duels. Two of them were duels against Yami Bakura. Spoilers, Kaiba versus Bakura's duel was interrupted, which makes me wonder who would have won. Following this, in Duel 2, Yugi is able to beat Bakura with his Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. However, with how powerful Bakura's deck was, were there any missed opportunities? Were there any small moments that could have changed the outcome of the duel? We won't know unless we jump into the duel. The duel begins and Bakura goes first. He draws, and his opening hand consists of Headless Knight, Earl of Demise, Polymerization, Diabound Kernel, Spirit Illusion, and Mirror Tablet. Bakura immediately activates Polymerization, fusing his Headless Knight with Earl of Demise to summon the Duke of Demise. Its effect makes it so it can't be destroyed by battle. However, Bakura must pay 500 life points during each of his standby phases if he wants to keep this monster on the field. Bakura ends his turn. Was it the right move for Bakura to hold those two traps in his hand and not set them face down? It's fine. Not a big issue. They wouldn't have helped him just yet. It's Kaiba's turn, and he draws. Oh my god, what's wrong with your chin? I'm so sorry, that was really insensitive. His opening hand consists of Force Raider, Lord of D, Blue Eyes White Dragon, Shrink, Silent Doom, and Attack Guidance Armor. Kaiba summons his Force Raider to the field. With only 1900 attack, it's unable to get over Duke of Demise. So he activates his Shrink spell, which halves the attack of a monster on the field. He halves Duke of Demise's attack. Kaiba orders Force Raider to attack into Duke of Demise. While it's not destroyed, Bakura still takes the damage. As Kaiba ends his turn, the Duke of Demise's attack returns to normal. Now, I just want to point out that Kaiba was aware of Duke of Demise's ability to keep itself alive, yet he still went with this Shrink play. Was it a good move? Not really. I think he would have been much better off setting that Shrink face down and waiting for the counter attack, because it's a little bit of damage. Regardless of what Bakura does next turn, he can just slam his monster into his monster. So why not hold onto that Shrink? You might be able to tank that attack and then potentially another attack, worst case scenario. And I'm curious to see, would Bakura have still summoned what he's about to summon, his Diabound Kernel on the next turn, getting rid of this monster? I think he would have, because he doesn't want to pay the 500 life point cost every turn. And if he would have had that on the field, it wouldn't have actually saved him, now I think about it, so I guess it's fine. But I think Shrink was just worth holding on to. It's back to Bakura, and he draws Spirit Shield. The standby phase occurs and Bakura pays 500 life points to keep Duke of Demise on the field. Bakura tributes Duke of Demise to summon his boss monster, Diabound Kernel. This monster can equip or unequip itself to a monster on the field. While equipped, that monster loses attack equal to this card's attack. If the equipped monster leaves the field through destruction, this monster resummons itself back to the field. Bakura follows up this play by activating his equip spell, Spirit Illusion. He equips it to Diabound Kernel. Once equipped, a doppelganger token of the monster is summoned to the field, with the exact same stats and effect for as long as this card remains equipped to that monster. Bakura activates the effect of the doppelganger Diabound, equipping it to Kaiba's Force Raider, reducing its attack by 1800. Bakura moves into his battle phase and attacks and destroys Force Raider with Diabound Kernel. Doppelganger Diabound Kernel then resummons itself back to Bakura's side of the field. Bakura sets his Spirit Shield trap face down and ends his turn. It's Kaiba's turn, and he draws the Flute of Summoning Dragons. Kaiba summons his Lord of D to the field. He then activates his Flute of Summoning Dragon, which has the effect that if Lord of D is on the field, he can now summon up to 2 dragons in his hand. He summons Blue Eyes White Dragon. Kaiba enters his battle phase and attacks Diabound Kernel. Thanks to Lord of D's effect, Dragon-type monsters can't be targeted by the effects of spell, trap, and monsters. Because of this, Bakura activates his set, Spirit Shield. Now, by banishing a fiend or zombie monster from his grave, he can negate an attack and end a battle phase. However, if there are no fiend or zombie monsters in the grave, this card destroys itself. Bakura banishes his Headless Knight in the grave to immediately end the battle phase. Kaiba sets his Attack Guidance Armor face down and ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and the penultimate turn of the duel. He draws and gets Pot of Greed. He activates it immediately, allowing him to draw 2 new cards. He gets Rebirth Tablet and Grief Tablet. Unable to equip his Direbound Colonel to Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragon due to Lord of D's effect, he has to play around this. So he activates Grief Tablet, equipping it to Kaiba's Lord of D. The equipped monster now cannot attack, change its battle position, and its effects are negated. Also, when Grief Tablet is sent to the grave while equipped to a monster, 500 damage is dealt to the owner of that monster. Now, with Lord of D's effect negated, Bakura is free to target dragon monsters with card effects. He equips his Doppelganger Direbound Colonel to Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragon, reducing its attack by 1800. The original Direbound Colonel attacks Blue Eyes White Dragon, attempting to destroy it. Now, I actually think it's quite important for me to jump in here and say that Bakura's goal this entire duel is to destroy Blue Eyes White Dragon with Direbound Colonel. Why? Because it has an out-of-duel ability that it can absorb the powers of the monster it destroys. He wants to do this so he can absorb Blue Eyes White Dragon's Burst Stream of Destruction, because Burst Stream of Destruction is actually so powerful, it can fight against gods with it. And he wants this for the final climax of the series. It's all out of duel stuff. It's not important for duel analysis. Basically, if he achieves that, Bakura has essentially won this mini-game going on that Kaiba doesn't know about. Anyway, back in the duel, Direbound Colonel is about to attack Blue Eyes and destroy it. However, Kaiba activates the effect of his set Attack Guidance Armor, which redirects the attack to his Lord of D instead. It's destroyed. Since Grief Tablet was sent to the grave, a further 500 damage is dealt. Bakura ends his turn by setting Rebirth Tablet and Mirror Tablet face down. It's Kaiba's turn, and the final turn of the duel. He draws and gets Card of Demise. He activates it. Now, this card allows him to draw until he holds 5 cards. However, he must discard his entire hand 5 turns later, which, once again, that is one of the most broken anime cards that exists. That's crazy. Kaiba draws 4 new cards. He gets Soul Release, a second copy of Blue Eyes White Dragon, Monster Reborn, and a mysterious card. First of all, Kaiba deals with Bakura's Spirit Shield by activating Soul Release. This card lets him banish up to 5 cards in the grave. He banishes Bakura's Earl of Demise and Duke of Demise. Since there are no fiend or zombies in the grave anymore, Spirit Shield destroys itself. Following this, Kaiba plays his Silent Doom, which lets him special summon a normal monster in his grave. However, it's summoned into defense and it cannot declare an attack. He summons Vorse Raider. He tributes Vorse Raider and Blue Eyes White Dragon, which is equipped with the Doppelganger Direbound Colonel to summon the second copy of Blue Eyes White Dragon. The Doppelganger Colonel is permanently removed from the field. Kaiba enters his battle phase and attacks and destroys the original Direbound Colonel. After its destruction, Bakura activates his Rebirth Tablet, which lets him summon a monster in his grave to the field if one of his monsters was just destroyed by battle. He summons back Direbound Colonel. He then activates his last trap, Mirror Tablet. When one of his monsters is destroyed by battle, this card lets Bakura increase the attack of one of his monsters by half the attack of the monster that destroyed that monster, and forces it to attack this card. Direbound Colonel gains 1500 attack, half the attack of Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Blue Eyes White Dragon is forced to attack into Direbound Colonel. Direbound Colonel destroys Blue Eyes White Dragon. Following the battle, Direbound Colonel's attack returns to normal. Kaiba, possibly moving into his main phase 2, though this could be happening in his battle phase, activates his Monster Reborn, bringing back his Blue Eyes White Dragon. Unfortunately, at this moment, the sun begins to rise. Bakura abruptly ends the duel. There is no clear winner to the duel, however Bakura has won the mini-game as he was able to destroy Blue Eyes White Dragon and absorb its Burst Stream attack. So, what would have happened if the duel would have continued? And why did you say he seemingly moves into his main phase 2 when he played Monster Reborn? It's a normal spell, he can't activate it in the battle phase. Well, in my opinion, I think Kaiba would have won the duel this turn. You see, if Battle City mechanics are still working in the Dawn of the Duel arc, then that means that normal spell cards can be used like quick play spells. The way they work is during the battle phase of your turn, if you've got a normal spell, it can be used as a quick play. If you want to use it during your opponent's turn, you set a normal spell face down and it becomes a quick play during the opponent's turn. It's wacky, I know, and there are quick play spells that exists during this. It's just kind of a thing that happens. So potentially that Blue Eyes White Dragon summon with a monster reborn, it could have been during the battle phase, and if that's the case, Kaiba just attacks into Bakura and wins the duel. But you might be saying, well, no, I don't think the Battle City rules apply here. Well, then, okay, in that situation, why didn't Kaiba just use Monster Reborn before the battle phase? Tribute summon Blue Eyes White Dragon, activate Monster Reborn, bring back Blue Eyes White Dragon, enter his battle phase, use the first Blue Eyes White Dragon to attack Colonel. Colonel summons itself back through the trap effect, forces Blue Eyes to attack into it. Then we go into the next battle with Blue Eyes White Dragon, attack into Colonel. It's destroyed. We deal enough damage to win the duel. So, I mean, we could have won this way. I can only assume that Kaiba was playing cautiously. So, okay, let's consider that. Kaiba played cautiously. He didn't want to use Monster Reborn prior to the battle phase in case those set cards were something devastating. So, what would happen after this? Well, brings back his Blue Eyes White Dragon. Kaiba has one mysterious card in his hand. This could be a spell trap or another monster or something. So, let's say it's a spell or trap. He sets it face down. We move over to Bakura's turn. He's got that Diabound Colonel. He can equip that onto Blue Eyes White Dragon to reduce its attack by 1800. Now it all depends on what did Bakura draw. Did he get a monster with over 1200 attack that he can summon to the field and destroy Blue Eyes White Dragon? Would the back row have helped Kaiba keep his Blue Eyes alive? It's unfortunately, we don't know how this duel would have continued. There's too many variables to go with here. But in my opinion, I do think that Kaiba might have won this duel. Anyway, we have another duel to cover. Yugi versus Bakura. The duel begins and Yugi goes first. He draws and his opening hand consists of Marshmallow, Silent Swordsman level 0, Marshmallow Glasses, and 3 mysterious cards. Note that this duel, Yugi using a completely new deck, basically got to fabricate the cards he wanted to, of cards that exist in the real world, and this is the deck he came up on the fly with. So this is his first time using these cards ever. He states it during the middle of this duel, and I think it's really impressive that he goes on to win, because he's built a really cool strategy around this, and obviously it's about evolving monsters, which is a representation of Yugi getting stronger over the course of the series, all things like that, and it's more of Yugi's playful side. He's kind of got like that toy kiddie thing, so some of the cards are a little bit kiddish, but I always find it really interesting. And you might be asking, what are those 3 mysterious cards, Sam? Well, at the end of this duel, he's going to have 6 mysterious cards in his hand, so it's kind of wacky, but I'll talk about it more when we get to the end of the duel. Yugi sets his continuous spell, Marshmallow Glasses face down, along with his Marshmallow, and ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws. His opening hand consists of Doom Caliber Knight, Disgraced Mage, Negate Defense, Narrow Corridor, Spirit Sword of Sealing, and Zoe the Spirits. Bakura summons his Doom Caliber Knight to the field. He uses it to attack Yugi's set monster. The monster is revealed to be Marshmallow. Since it was flipped up via battle, due to its effect, it inflicts 1000 damage to the opponent. Bakura takes the first damage of the duel. As well, Marshmallow's second effect is it can't be destroyed by battle, so it remains on the field. Bakura ends his turn by setting Doma the Spirit face down. Now, Bakura potentially has 2 alternative plays here. One of the cards he's got in his hand is Negate Defense, which switches a monster that is in defense or face down defense into face up attack, and it's stuck in that position. He could have done this. This was a perfect opportunity to do it. So 1, he wouldn't have taken 1000 damage from attacking into the Marshmallow, and 2, he could have just slammed his monster into that monster. I can only assume he didn't want to waste this card on something so early. He does end up using it on this card, but I can understand not wanting using it straight away, but it definitely feels like a misplay not using it, because this would have been an absolute metric ton of damage to get in so early in the duel, and I'm pretty sure it would have led to a cascade event where there's so much damage dealt now, Yugi probably would have lost after all the damage he takes a little bit later, but I guess we'll keep our eyes on that. If we would have done 1600 damage here, what would have happened? Well, we're going to find out. And what was the other ability? Well, he could have used his Spirit Sword of Sealing to seal this card and banish it for a while, which would have been a good move. But again, I think this is the same situation where maybe he doesn't want to waste this on such a small card. We don't know what it is just yet. It could be just be a non-threat, so I kind of understand. But that would have been 1900 damage to Yugi's face. That would have been very powerful. Let's see how things play out. It's back to Yugi, and he draws Turn Jump. He sets it face down immediately and then summons his Silent Swordsman level 0. This monster has the effect that its level increases by 1 during every one of Yugi's standby phases, and each time it does, it gains 500 original attack. Yugi follows up this play by making sure Silent Swordsman stays safe long enough to level up. So he activates his set Marshmallow Glasses. Now, while this card and Marshmallow are face up on the field, the opponent can only attack Marshmallow. Yugi ends his turn. Fun fact, Yugi could have gone on the offensive here. He could have activated his turn jump spell in his hand to move the turn clock forward by 3 during the battle phase to make his Silent Swordsman strong enough to destroy Doom Caliber Knight. Seems like a good play in theory, but it actually would have cost him. It's lucky that Yugi didn't do that, knowing how the duel is going to go. So I think having this card as a reactionary thing is a good thing, so it's okay. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Call of the Earthbound. Bakura activates his Negate Defense spell, which switches a monster on the field into attack and makes it so that monster cannot change its battle positions. Bakura switches Marshmallow into attack. Bakura slams his Doom Caliber Knight into Yugi's Marshmallow. Marshmallow isn't destroyed by the battle, but Yugi still takes the damage. Bakura sets his Call of the Earthbound face down and ends his turn. And it's about here in the duel where I have to say, yeah, Bakura should have won this duel already. So if he would have used that Negate Defense on the last turn on the Marshmallow, attacked with the Doom Caliber Knight, he'd have done 1600 damage. This turn, he could do another 1600 damage, and then if he also would have summoned his Disgraced Mage, he could have done even more damage going for game. Misplay Bakura, cost you the duel, unfortunately. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws a mysterious card. The standby phase occurs, and Silent Swordsman's level and attack increases. Yugi enters his battle phase. However, Bakura activates his Call of the Earthbound, and then chains his Zoma the Spirit to it. Zoma resolves first, allowing him to summon it as a trap monster to the field. It has the effect that if it is destroyed by battle, the battle phase immediately ends, and then it inflicts damage to the opponent equal to double the attack of the monster that destroyed it. Call of the Earthbound resolves next. This card lets Bakura force one of Yugi's monsters into battling one of his monsters. He chooses Silent Swordsman to attack Zoma the Spirit. It is destroyed. Thanks to the effect of Zoma, since it was destroyed by battle, Yugi must now take double his monster's attack as damage. If this play is successful, Bakura will win the duel. However, Yugi activates his quick play, Turn Jump. This card immediately skips to the third battle phase after this battle phase. 3 turns move ahead, meaning Silent Swordsman evolves 3 times. As well, because of the turn skipping, Zoma the Spirit's effect was nullified. And you might be asking, how does that nullify the ability? Well, let's go in the timeline. So we're moving along, Silent Swordsman into the battle phase, the traps activate, he attacks into it. The next thing that's about to happen is damage being dealt to Yugi. However, Yugi plays the turn skip, which I can only assume jumps over the damage and moves us ahead in the future. So we never actually did this, we moved past it into the future. That's the way I would describe it, like in my head, how you can dodge damage like that. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm not going to call a misplay for this because, yeah, that makes sense to me. However, what I am going to call a misplay for is Bakura. Bakura was way too frothing at the mouth to do this combo. Yugi was in his battle phase and was starting to do something with a card in his hand, which I have no idea what he was going to do because I assumed the only play he could do was using Turn Jump so he could attack over Doom Caliber Knight, but Turn Jump was set on his field. So then what was this card in Yugi's hand he was about to use? He never uses it for the rest of the duel, but apparently would have done something here. If this is just a continuity error and Yugi was always intending to use Turn Jump, but the animators just forgot where it was, then had Bakura waited, he could have used his trap combo to force the attack after this. He would have won since Yugi would no longer be able to dodge. I guess the only defense would that be is if Call of the Earthbound has to be done prior to the battle being declared. The real world version of Call of the Earthbound works when the opponent declares an attack and then you choose the attack target. This one doesn't state the opponent has to declare an attack. It just says activate during your opponent's battle phase, select a monster your opponent controls. The selected monster must attack a target of your choosing. So I guess it depends on the ruling on that one. So yeah, potentially Bakura could have won if he wasn't so fast. Anyway, getting back to the duel with a 3000 attack Silent Swordsman, and in a new battle phase, Yugi attacks again, destroying Doom Caliber Knight. Marshmallow then attacks Bakura directly. Yugi ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Necro Cycle. He activates his Spirit Sword of Sealing. This card banishes one monster on the field until a monster is destroyed and then sent to Yugi's grave. Bakura banishes Silent Swordsman. He summons his Disgraced Mage and attacks Marshmallow. It is not destroyed, but Yugi still takes the damage. Bakura ends his turn. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws Blocken. He summons it into defense. Now, if a monster he controls is selected for an attack target, this monster can redirect the attack to itself. Then, if it is destroyed by battle, it special summons the monster Lengard from Yugi's deck. Yugi ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Cursed Twin Dolls. Bakura immediately enters his battle phase and attacks Marshmallow, attempting to go for game. However, Blocken redirects the attack to itself. It's destroyed and Lengard is summoned to the field in its place. Lengard's effect is if you would take battle damage from a battle involving a monster you control, you can destroy this face-up card instead. Now here is where Silent Swordsman would have returned to the field, since a monster went to the grave. However, due to Disgraced Mage's effect, it causes any monster it destroys by battle to instead return back to the deck. So, since a monster wasn't destroyed and sent to the grave, Silent Swordsman remains banished. Bakura sets his Cursed Twin Dolls, Narrow Corridor, and Necro Cycle face down, and ends his turn. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws another mysterious card. Yugi moves straight into his battle phase and orders Marshmallow to attack Disgraced Mage. Due to Marshmallow's effect, it is not destroyed by the battle. As well, due to Lengard's effect, since Yugi would take damage, this monster destroys itself instead. Since a monster finally went to the graveyard after being destroyed, Silent Swordsman returns itself to the field. Silent Swordsman attacks Disgraced Mage. However, Bakura activates Disgraced Mage's second effect, which allows it to spin itself back into the deck along with every card in Bakura's hand in order to nullify any damage he would have taken from a battle. Since Bakura's hand is empty, only Disgraced Mage is shuffled back into the deck. Yugi ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Pot of Greed. He activates it to draw 2 new cards. He gets Necro Soldier and Necro Mannequin. Bakura activates his set, Cursed Twin Dolls. Now, Yugi has a choice to make, a red or a black box. One contains a positive buff, the other a negative curse. Whichever one he chooses will be bestowed upon him. Whatever's in the other box will be bestowed upon the opponent. Yugi chooses the red box, which is revealed to be the positive effect. Now, whenever a card is sent to Yugi's grave, he will gain 200 life points for the rest of the duel. Bakura receives the curse box. Now, his graveyard no longer exists for the rest of the duel. All cards in the grave and any cards sent to the grave are banished, but they are classed as being on the field. The banished monsters on the field cannot attack, be attacked, block direct attacks, cannot activate their effects, cannot be used as a cost, cannot be moved from where they are unaffected by the effects of spells, traps, and effect monsters, and their effects are negated. Essentially, they are spooky ghosts hovering on the field, but are classed as being monsters on the field without actually occupying any zones. I'm going to make this an official zone for the rest of this duel. I'm going to call it Limbo, this between life and death kind of thing. I think it's fitted. So overall, a good choice by Yugi, right? Now Bakura doesn't have a grave anymore. Well, unfortunately, this was all a part of Bakura's plan, as he summons his Necro Soldier into defense and ends his turn. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws Silent Magician level 0. The standby phase occurs. Necro Soldier's effect activates, which lets him once per turn summon a copy of itself from the deck. The second copy now on the field during the standby phase activates its effect, summoning the final copy of itself from the deck. Silent Swordsman's effect then activates. Since the standby phase occurred, its level and attack increases by 1. Yugi summons his Silent Magician level 0 into attack. This monster has an identical effect to Silent Magician. However, instead, each time the opponent draws a card, this is when its level increases by 1 and gains 500 attack. Yugi enters his battle phase and orders Marshmallow and Silent Magician to destroy 2 of the Necro Soldiers. They are destroyed and sent to Limbo. Before Yugi can attack with Silent Swordsman, Bakura activates his set, Narrow Corridor. This card's effect makes it so now, for as long as it remains on the field, Yugi can only attack with 2 monsters per turn. Yugi, with no further plays, ends his turn. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Counterbalance. Due to Bakura drawing a card, Silent Magician's level increases by 1 along with its attack. With all the pieces in place, Bakura goes for his win condition. He activates his continuous spell, Counterbalance. Now, while this card remains on the field during each player's end phase, the turn player must send cards from the top of their deck to the grave equal to the number of total monsters on both players' fields. The plan is to win via deck out by making Yugi just deck out all his cards, but there's only a couple monsters on the field, right? It'll take a while. No, there's a lot of monsters on the field. Not only that, Yugi correctly points out, wait, you're at the same risk as me, since you'll have to mill from your deck as well. However, this isn't the case. Since Bakura is cursed by the Black Doll box, he technically has no graveyard anymore. So the criteria send cards to the grave can't be completed by him, meaning Bakura doesn't have to suffer any of the negative effects to the grave. And not only that, but all those spooky monsters in Limbo, they're classed as being on the field, so they count towards all the cards now that Yugi has to mill. Oh dear. And so, Bakura summons his Necro Mannequin into defense. He then activates his set Necro Cycle, which allows him to, once per turn during either player's turn, while he controls a face-up Necro Mannequin, special summon a Necro Mannequin from his deck. He uses his effect right away to summon a second copy into defense. Bakura ends his turn. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws. The standby phase occurs, and Silent Swordsman's level and attack increases. Bakura activates the effect of Necro Cycle to summon the last copy of Necro Mannequin from his deck into defense. Yugi enters his battle phase. He attacks and destroys one of the Necro Soldiers and one of the Necro Mannequins. The monsters are sent to Limbo. As Yugi's turn comes to an end now, Counterbalance's effect activates. Since there are 11 total monsters on the field, Yugi is forced to send the top 11 cards of his deck to the grave. Yugi loses a huge chunk of his deck. However, due to the blessing of Red Doll Box's effect, he gains 200 life points for every card that was sent to the grave. It's Bakura's turn, and he draws Necro Wall. Since Bakura drew a card, Silent Magician's level and attack increases. Bakura summons his Necro Wall into defense and then activates its effect, which lets him summon a Necro Wall token for each zombie type monster on the field other than itself. He summons 2 Necro Wall tokens into defense. Bakura ends his turn. It's Yugi's turn, and he draws Aria from Beyond. The standby phase occurs and Silent Swordsman's attack and level increases. Yugi enters his battle phase and immediately attacks and destroys the 2 Necro Wall tokens. Since tokens disappear when they are destroyed, they are not sent to Limbo, and thus there are actually 2 less cards on the field for counterbalance during the end phase. Yugi moves into his main phase 2 and activates Aria from Beyond. This card lets him activate the effect of a banished spell card. He activates Bakura's Spirit Sword of Sealing. Just to reiterate, Spirit Sword of Sealing was banished through the effect of the Black Box. Black Box only makes it so monsters are completely uninteractable in the Limbo Zone, not these spells. They're just classed as being like banished basically. So what Yugi's doing here is absolutely fine. It's fine. Yugi uses Spirit Sword's effect to banish his own monster, Silent Swordsman level 7. It is now banished until the monster Yugi controls is destroyed and sent to the grave. The reason why Yugi did this will be revealed soon. However, Silent Swordsman looks pretty betrayed in the moment, I can't lie. As the end phase occurs, Counterbalance activates, forcing Yugi to mill another 11 cards from his deck. He is left with only 5 cards. However, his life points do increase. It's Bakura's turn, and the penultimate turn of the duel. He draws and gets Necrojar. Since Bakura drew a card, Silent Magician's level increases by 1. Bakura, knowing he will win on Yugi's next end phase, decides, regardless, to push for game. He summons Necrojar to the field into attack. Its effect is that it is unaffected by the effects of spell cards, meaning Marshmallow Glasses don't work on it. If Necrojar is destroyed by battle, the opponent must send 1 card from the top of their deck to the grave for every multiple of 300 damage Bakura takes. Bakura crashes Necrojar into Silent Magician level 3. Necrojar is destroyed and Bakura takes 1400 damage. Since he took 4 multiples of 300 damage, 4 cards are milled from the top of Yugi's deck, leaving him with only 1 card left. Yugi gains life points since cards were sent to his grave. Bakura ends his turn by using the effect of his Necro Wall to special summon another 2 Necro Wall tokens to his field. I just want to point out, Bakura says something wacky this turn. He's like, oh, if you didn't take that Silent Swordsman off the field, I was going to crash it into that and win through deck out that way. Which, I don't know how he would have done that, because he would have taken so much damage he would have lost if he would have crashed his monster into that. So I thought it was a weird thing to say. It's Yugi's turn, and the final turn of the duel. He draws and gets the last card in his deck, which is of course the perfect card to save him in this dire situation, Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. He summons it to the field by tributing his Marshmallow and Silent Magician level 3. Since these cards weren't destroyed when they were sent to the grave, Sword of Sealing doesn't release Silent Swordsman. Yugi activates the effect of his Gandora. By paying half his life points, he can destroy and then banish all other monsters on the field. However, this card destroys itself afterwards. Necro Wall, 2 Necro tokens, and 2 Necro mannequins are destroyed and then sent to Limbo. Following this, Gandora destroys itself and then goes to Yugi's grave. We don't see it, but Yugi should have gained 200 life points here, along with 400 more for Marshmallow and Silent Magician going to the grave earlier. This doesn't really matter, as now, since the monster was destroyed and went to the grave, Spirit Sword of Sealing frees Silent Magician level 7. With a 4,500 attack monster, he attacks Bakura directly, winning him the duel. And oh my god, is that blood in Yu-Gi-Oh? You don't see that too often. Overall, this duel was fantastic. I really liked the decks they were playing, how awesome it was, but I will comment, Yugi has 6 mysterious cards in his hand in this final turn. What are these cards? Why couldn't he use them throughout the duel? Well, I guess if I had to assume, they're just monsters. Yugi doesn't want to put too many monsters on the field because he'd have to mill more cards, so I guess that probably makes sense. So maybe it's his gadget monsters or something. I'll let you guys comment down below what you think it is. And your next question might be, wait a minute. He's got 6 cards in his hands. Was there any moments throughout this duel where he had more than 6 cards in his hand and he was meant to discard? Because you can't have more than over 6 cards in your hand during the end phase of a turn, but you have to discard a card. So that one more card actually would have cost him a Gandora. Did that ever happen? No, I went through the entire duel. There was never a moment where Yugi ended his turn with 7 cards. He would always end his turn with 6, even though he did get up to 7 cards a few times. He'd always set or summon a monster before he ended his turn. Check out one of these 2 videos if you fancy and subscribe. Why? Because I have a Bakura anime duel coming up soon using Bakura's anime deck. So if you want to check that out, I highly recommend you subscribe. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Catch you later.